Welcome back, you guys. This is the Art School Graduate. Today, my guest is an art director, designer, illustrator whose work sits in the intersection of design, culture, and social justice. Known for his powerful collage-based visual style, he uses design to explore complex issues around politics, community, and Black culture, while uplifting stories that often go unheard. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest, David Perrin. How are you doing, sir?
Good, good, good. How are you?
I'm good. So, just for the people that are listening, we were speaking a little bit off camera about how I found him and how I reached out to him. So, I'm gonna allow him to tell his story. His story is phenomenal just through the research I've done and the conversations I've seen him have. So, for the people who are just discovering you, who are you and what do you do?
Yes, so I'm like you said, I'm a designer, I'm an art director, I'm a collage artist. And yeah, I feel like my work kind of sits on the intersection of just like really complex issues, dignity, and just making sure that I manifest like, just cultural memory with the work that I do on a day-to-day basis.
So, how would you describe the heart behind your work?
The heart behind my work. So I'd say it kind of goes back to like high school. So I think, well, not I think, but I was a part of what's it? I'm blanking right now.
It's all
The
good.
collegiate high school that so I basically graduated with like a high school diploma and associate's
Mhm.
degree at the same time. But a part of that program, I had to create a capstone project. Within that capstone project, my project was on basically institutionalizing like Black history, right, in
Mm,
schools, in classes, and everything like that. And some of the things that I found were that dignity kind of within archiving isn't it's not promised. You know what I mean?
mhm,
Like you kind of have to like kind of manifest it within the work that you do, right? As an
mhm,
educator, as a design thinker, that sort of thing. And so like it's kind of like on us to really manifest and create um an archive and a history and
mm,
a
mhm,
legacy that we want to be remembered, at the end of the
mhm.
day. Because there's so many stories that are untold. Um, and yeah, so like from there, I kind of took that as like a personal call to action in terms of the work that I do. And so, from there, and kind of went on and jumped into, did various things, but that kind of was like the core of the
Yeah.
how I got started in that work.
So I'm just curious, why did you choose that? What led to that choice of, okay, let me use this as a capstone when probably others were choosing something a lot more, I don't want to say fun, but more intriguing. So what was your thought process behind that?
Well, simply put, it was like my demographics that were like in
Mhm,
my school, in my classes, like how I like stood out, how I interpreted. Like I'm gonna just use American history, how I interpreted American history, and
mhm,
who was shown, who wasn't, how various stories were told, the civil rights movement, characters and actors within that movement, how art was also portrayed. I was taking art
mhm,
classes kind of for the first time on a collegiate level, and I'm at a community college, and so what is the basis of understanding in terms of like
mhm.
I'm just going to use American history in terms of like the in terms of curriculum and everything, right?
Yeah.
So like who am I taking in and why
Mhm,
am I taking them in? And who's forgotten, at the end of the
mhm,
day. And so through that process of like again, just taking these basic, entry level courses, on a college campus, I'm noticing a few things, and
mhm,
so, um, yeah, I think I wanted to try to hone in on the why, but then
mhm,
also tap into like what my responsibility is
mhm,
to get that message out, right,
mhm.
and to be a steward like in that space.
Yes.
Um,
Okay. That's interesting because it's just like I feel like a lot of people choose stuff that that's close to heart. You know what I mean? Where it's
mhm.
just like they start to realize like, hey, something's missing. And I feel like when people have that kind of initial thought, they make some of the most dope work. It's like you can feel the passion, you can see the love. It's not just, I hate to say it, paint thrown on a wall or
Right, right,
just
right, right.
like everybody knows what that means, but it's just like that's awesome. So, just curious, I know your journey in design was not traditional. You started in accounting, then moved through nonprofit, and then you went to design. So, talk us through that journey of like, okay, accounting, design, nonprofit. How did all this happen for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I mentioned high school. I was part of the NAACP Youth Council back then. And so I think some of that, like, I didn't know the word social justice back then. I used civil rights, and so some of that, I guess, civil rights work kind of was, kind of bubbling up, and I felt a personal responsibility to, my people, to just basic civil rights, just like learning a lot as a youth, right? I'm like, how many things are still, yeah, not written in policy, and
Hmm.
so, taking that and holding on to that as my core, helped me navigate, my career, as
Hmm.
I decided to kind of, just keep learning and growing and everything.
Hmm.
So my parents are Caribbean. They traditionalists in terms of what the outcomes of school needed to be, right?
Yeah.
So, doctor, lawyer, accountant, that sort of thing. And so yeah, I kind of I trusted them, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like I wanted to find a way to, to be financially viable in a market that was a little unshaky around the 2008 time
Hmm.
period and everything like that. And so I stuck with it. I decided to, yeah, study accounting. Also hopped into a master's program like shortly after, just to kind of put that rubber stamp on, like, like I'll have a job, or I'll be in the
Yeah.
running, for a job, and when will not be denied, sort of thing. Life had other decisions, other choices, and
Hmm.
so the pull of art and design definitely took hold. And so my first job out of college, I was working at a nonprofit, essentially color coordinating spreadsheets. Man, it got bad. It got was like trying to find an outlet within
Oh
my
my
space,
goodness.
So
Yeah.
I'm doing budget forecasts, but I'm color coordinating and doing a bunch of stuff, and like I just knew that like I was destined for more. And so I decided to hop into the continuing education program at SBA. I was determined to live in New York, and that's where I wanted to build my design career, my artistic career, and just take a leap of faith. And so that's essentially what I did. I cobbled together a very, what I say, I couldn't believe that they accepted me, because again, I'm studying finance, I'm doing
Hmm.
spreadsheets and everything like that. But on the back end, I was a editorial nerd, so I used to read a lot of like magazines,
Hmm.
GQ, Ebony, Essence, and one of the other magazines, Communication Arts. They had like little discs of
Hmm.
like Photoshop files, and so I would play around with those kind of in the back end. So I'm studying finance by day, and then by night I'm experimenting and trying to figure out this whole graphic
Hmm.
design thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little lost, but
No, 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 you're good. You're on
yeah,
track. I just said, how did you get to from accounting through nonprofit to now this design path that you are
yeah.
like just hedging forward on?
Absolutely. And so yeah,
Yeah.
so bridging the gap between, accounting, design, and then jumping into social impact.
Hmm.
When I kind of wrapped up my studies at SVA, I just wanted a job. I wanted a
Hmm.
job in finance. And so, or not in finance, but I just wanted a job in design. So I took whatever gigs
Hmm.
I could get. I was working in entertainment, doing all sorts of odd jobs and things, just trying to make ends meet. I eventually found my way. Um, Around the 2016 time, I think I just kind of made a decision that I was going to just work really intentionally to work in the social impact space. Again, like I didn't really know what all that language meant and everything, but I knew
Hmm.
that I had a higher calling in terms
Yeah.
of like where I wanted to design, and how
Hmm.
in the company that I wanted to be in terms of
Hmm.
what my portfolio and my body of work was going to look like. And so
Hmm.
that really started with my work at Demos, which is a
Hmm.
racial justice think tank, also a grantee of Ford's. And that's how I got connected to Ford. And Aaron, who sat at the board at the time, Darren Walker. I think I attended a board meeting and he was there, loved everything he had to say, and was looking into jobs. And coincidentally, everything kind of like synced up in terms of the timing,
Yeah.
and eventually found my way at the Ford Foundation. But um, between Demos and Ford, I've worked with a plethora of other nonprofits and
Hmm.
social impact groups, and yeah, I've really enjoyed the work, and so I've just stayed,
Hmm.
in this space, and just been really appreciative of the work that I've been able to do and the organizations I've helped to uplift.
Man, that's dope. It sounds like a great journeyman right there. It seems like you took a little bit from everything. Just saying,
Yeah,
like,
thank you, man.
hearing that sounds like a journeyman right there. But it seems like it didn't like stop you. It just seemed like you were just like, okay, what's next? Okay, what's next? Okay, like you just kept forging through, which is crazy. So I'm just curious, what did this path you forged like teach you? Like going on this journey through different jobs and trusting that your parents are going to like help you out with like understanding like the path you need to have. So what did your path teach you?
Um, Man, just lean in, dude. Like you
Mhm.
you have to lean in on like who you know who you are.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even if things feel a little shaky and
Mhm.
like untested, like risk is so important to take. Like calculated risk, but like you just never know where things are going to lead you, and so you just kind of have to lead. In the work that I do, like I got to lead with my heart, right? I have to lead
Yeah.
with faith. So stepping outside of design principles a little bit and just kind of lean on external forces to kind of push you forward in
Mhm.
terms of yeah, just what you're receiving,
Mhm.
from your environment, and and in terms of like forging your path. I think a lot of ways I grappled a lot with like my contingency plan with
Mhm.
accounting. Like I was so hard on myself about it. I was like, man, like I missed the moment. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like I missed, there were so many people of my age group that had graduated and were forging their way in whatever career path that they had
Mhm.
chosen. And like in that same moment, I decided to go back to school and pick up another skill, one that was untested. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? And so, yeah, I didn't need to be so hard on myself, you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
needed to kinda take one step after the other and see where it was gonna take me, but, I would say, yeah, just, like, don't rock the boat in terms of, like, the internal energy you have in terms
Mhm.
of your contingencies, right? So, like, they're there, but also, lean into who you think you are, and, you just never know what's on the other side of that.
Right, right. So back to this journeyman story, it seems like through your own job and then even places you've lived with, from Texas to Florida to Michigan, now you're stable in New York. With all that going on top of having Caribbean parents with Jamaican roots and all that information. So you're working with a lot here. So how has this layered sense of like forgive me, identity influence the way you see like community, image making, and culture?
Right. I've seen a lot of different like just like topologies, right? Like
Mhm.
communities and cities and people from all kind of like different walks of life, right? I've seen rural life, I've seen bits and parts of like city life and suburban life and everything. And so like and even yeah, being Jamaican, going back to the island and just trying to, take all those life lessons and take all those people that and I'm mentioned people, I'll get back to people in a second, but like people and communities and really kind of, just hold them tightly, right? Hold them
Mhm.
tightly, hold them close, and sit with the different visibilities
Mm.
that each group has, right? And so that's kind of the things that I carry, with all the moves and everything. I think I charted it. I think I went to like 11 different schools between preschool and elementary. And so like it's a lot of different types of people, different
Mhm.
communities and everything that and I've been a part of. And so, the one thing I do believe at the end of the day is the power of people, the power of
Mhm.
community. I've seen it just work in various ways. And so I think
Mhm.
it's really important for me to like to hold all of that as I, continue on with my work in all aspects and all fronts.
So let's talk about your work a little bit. This visual language, your collage work has a very distinct voice within it. When you did collage, was it a technique that brought you to it, or was it something in the process that made you feel like, hey, this is something I can deeply connect with? What was it about this collage work? And I'll share some with the people a little bit later on. But what is it with this collage work that first attracted you to it?
I think it was just my love for photography, right? Like I
Hmm.
mentioned the magazines from back in the day. Like I still collected those kind of as an adult.
Hmm.
Moving to New York, one of the hubs for magazine publications and everything. So being able to grab those up and still participate and partake. In terms of medium in art school, I really wanted to be a portrait artist, and so I did a
Hmm.
lot of digital portraits and everything like that. Also had a bit of a stint in doing some pop-ups in New York,
Hmm.
in trying to just, like, showcase other people, showcase myself, showcase my art and everything, but there was something about collage that
Hmm.
really spoke to me, and I think it's because, it's rooted, at least mine, it's rooted in photography. And, a lot of the issues that I work in are complex, right?
Hmm.
They have just different levels of just like representation, right?
Hmm.
I'll use criminal justice reform as an example. Like if you Google criminal justice reform right now, if you throw that into, any stock house, you're gonna get a lot of like police cars and
Hmm.
tape, and and it can come off really not jarring, but it's just, a lot of that imagery doesn't, it's not welcoming. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And so, criminal justice reform should be something that is tempered with some more nuance across like just all the different like issue areas and everything like that. And so I think very early on at my time at Demos, I worked a lot on voting rights, but like also another topic, a lot very nuanced, very left and
Hmm.
right. And so, how do you hone in on everyday people's experiences to where like this can be, a nonpartisan issue that can empower and can and drive people to polls and be galvanizing at the end of the day. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So
Yeah, yeah.
so just yeah, I think as a medium, I'm constantly picking and plucking, for texture, right? Like I
Hmm.
always believe in like in this work, I feel like, again, like things are nuanced and they should be textured. They should
Hmm.
have some depth to it. And so yeah, I'll attribute some of that early learning to art school and some of my early
Hmm.
collage class. I made some really cool work,
Hmm.
in my early classes and everything like that, and that kind of definitely spilt out into the real world. So yeah, I'm just happy I found it as a medium.
Yeah. So I've talked to other collage artists, Adolphus Washington. Um, it's another gentleman I'm forgetting, but I always was curious about this one question, which is what can collage communicate emotionally or symbolically that other design approaches sometimes cannot?
It's the human hand of it all,
Hmm.
right? It is taking imagery that already exists, whether it be archival, whether it be, something that's on a specific issue
Hmm.
area, and helping to humanize, I think, really
Mm.
humanize the issue or the topic,
Mm.
right? And again, I mentioned nuance, I mentioned textures, like it just gives you supplemental, just visual examples, things that can resonate
Mm.
in real time in a way that I think is poignant and grounding, in the work and everything. And so,
Mm.
yeah, like I said, just very humanizing and hard to miss. Like it's hard
Mhm.
to, you get the point when you see it, type of thing.
So how do you decide when when an image should be either like comforting or challenging, or do you choose to make it both, or is it just a theme you have that you're working with at that time? So how do you choose your images? That's what I'm really curious about too.
Yeah, it really depends on the tone. I know for Ford, like we lean more on the empowering end of the
Hmm.
spectrum in terms of imagery, and so and I love that. That's kind of like been my ethos within even stepping into collage as a medium, is that like I want um uh,
Excuse me.
the subject matter, whether it be like a policy change, whether it
Mhm.
be a group of individuals, an organization, whatever that image is supposed to represent, for it to feel empowering at the end of the
Mhm.
day. And so yeah, it's really dependent on tone. I try to stay away from the things that are gonna make feel folks feel taken advantage of
Mhm.
or disenfranchised, that sort of thing. And I think there's a time and place for all of that. And obviously there's a spectrum, but I think my job is to take the best bits,
Mhm.
put them in, have the cause, have the problem, but also try to come up with a solution, right? And so I'm trying to balance the two at best, but
Mm.
doing it in an empowering way.
That's dope. So I know we just touched on a few of like the theories of why you choose and this and that. So let's talk about like the process. So what comes first? Is it concept? Is it emotion, texture, symbols? Like what is it for you when it comes to when you sit down and you have your initial thought or your initial spark? What is it comes first? Is it note taking? Is it image sketching? Or is it just going through a magazine, sitting there and just cutting things out?
Right. It really depends on the subject. It really depends on the subject. I've done a lot of posters last year for a few documentaries, and so obviously I need to know you know, this
Okay.
subject before I hop in. So yeah, learning a little bit about the subject and then pulling out those visual cues, pulling
Hmm.
out like what makes sense as a visual, and then what makes sense as a secondary and a
Hmm.
third. Like how do I layer on these feelings and emotions and these items that pertain to like the bigger broader story. Yeah.
So is it okay if I share your website so we could just you can talk
Yeah,
me through one of them?
yeah.
Okay. So I'm gonna share this screen. For the people watching, you'll be able to see it, but for the ones listening, I'm gonna allow David to explain what you're seeing here. So you tell me which one you would like to go with, and I can enlarge it.
Right. So I'll go with It Takes a Village, that first
Okay.
one. Yeah. So this was a piece I made for the Brooklyn Children Museum. It
Mhm,
was an art installation for Art Rink. And the theme was It Takes a Village. And so
mhm,
like I'm visually trying to embody like what that means. And so being that the work needed to be curated for the Brooklyn Children's Museum, I wanted to do this thing that like um, really just like involved a lot of hands, right?
mhm,
Involved a lot of hands, a lot of people. And so this image that you see is kind of like the son cradling a child, right? But then
mhm,
also having that supplemental um, support,
mhm.
from the community, from down below and everything. And so, yeah, I really love this image, and I feel like it truly taps into the theme in the way that's yeah, just super meaningful and positive.
So as I look at this, I love it. My only question to you is, why didn't you add more hands? Is that something you thought about or struggled with, or was it, less is more in something in this essence?
Right. So yes, that's a good question. So one of the things I struggle with, I think, quite a bit is this juxtaposition between less
Mhm,
is more and more is more and whatnot. And so yeah, I've definitely from the start of my work to where I am now, I think I've scaled back in terms of imagery and everything, just to kind of make the point. Sometimes the work can feel a little busy, in like in my earlier pieces and everything like that. So I
mhm,
wanted something that was just kind of like easy to look at. You like, again, just leaning into the less is more. Um,
mm,
thought about that, thought about more hands and everything, but I was like, you know what, let me hold off and try to, try to have a little tact in terms of
yeah.
you know what I mean?
So what was the size of this?
This I think was like I think it's like 30 feet or something, like 30 feet tall, but
Wow,
I don't know what the length was, but it was like,
got
yeah, it
you.
was pretty, yeah, pretty tall.
Oh man, this is beautiful. Man, thank you for that. I'm telling you, I was looking through your work and I was just like, I feel like my OCD, I would have snuck in a few more hands.
Right, right, right,
They may not be as big, but I would have been like, okay, I'm gonna put one here, like one on top of it, so it looks like it's patting the baby's head,
right.
supporting the arm. Like I would have went overboard, but it's great. Like I find that like a very beautiful piece right there, and it just shows like the support a lot of our culture and our community has for one another when it
Absolutely.
comes to like that. It's like the true definition of it takes a community to
Yeah,
raise this child. Like that's what I got when I saw from it. But hearing your breakdown of it, it kind of like just amplifies it. So that's amazing, man. Thank you for sharing that with us.
appreciate it. Yeah.
So, um, something I came across too is that a lot of issues you've designed around are nuanced, sensitive, and deeply human. So, how do you create visuals around subjects like racial justice, abortion, voting rights, and policies without flattening the people and the communities centered at those stories?
Simply put, I just lean into empowerment. It is the bedrock of my work. I mean, I'll bring up that, the just the stock houses and
Mhm.
again, if you type in these issues, 90% of the time, 100% of the time, collectively, they aren't things that like
Right.
really help tell the story, right? Largely degrading at its base. And so yeah, I my job is to tap into humanity, right, in a
Hmm.
real way, and dignity, self-determination, like everything at its core. So yeah, and then we a lot of times, I'm backing that up against folks who are actually doing the work. I'm talking to grantees. Hey, how does this represent your work? I'm asking the question. It's not, I'm only one person, right?
Hmm.
And I have my community of creatives around me who are also, chiming in and giving their feedback and everything. But we put it back in front of our grantees, at
Hmm.
Ford. And if I'm working for an organization, hey, like, what do y'all think about this? Like this, like, and I'll ask, like, hey, does this feel representative? Is there anything you want me to add or take out?
Hmm.
What's your visual language? Because everybody's different in terms of
Right.
how they want to be represented. And so it's really, I guess like a communal process in terms
Mhm.
of how I put these things out and how I put them together.
So how do you personally navigate that tension of doing it through your eyes, but also making clear like what's at stake here and empowering and trying not to wash out the voice? Like how do you balance that tension?
Well, it's knowing a little bit about the subject, right? And
Mhm.
so, just doing my due diligence, highlighting, pulling out points, like what do I think the layman's terms visual could be for this particular thing, or subject or organization, and just helping to build kind of a mood board of like what feels right, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? And kinda going from there and picking and choosing, of what makes sense. Sometimes I even send that mood board out to the organization before I even start, cutting stuff out and collecting.
Mhm.
What would you add? What would you take back? I have an example. I did the visual design for our East Africa office. We had I think they're celebrating their 65th
Mhm.
or 60th. I'm sorry, like 2 years ago. And I didn't ask them to do this, but they did it anyway. But they created a mood board for me. I think
Mhm.
I'd asked for like a handful of images. Like if you had, because I didn't want them to do too much
Too
research and too
much.
much
Yeah.
legwork. But they came back to me with a full, PowerPoint, Google slide deck of things that of do's and don'ts, right? Rules of the road, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. And it really helped shape the visual identity that we ended up landing with and stuff. And so, um, yeah, that type of collaboration is just really, it's super appreciated. And so, yeah, to your point, I mean, there's a juxtaposition in terms of tone, what needs to be put in the forefront, what doesn't need to get lost, and then what's at stake. And so we try to find that balance in terms of what needs to kind of be in the forefront and what needs to be in the background.
Right, right. Man, you got a blessing for that one. As a designer, you know how hard it is to just be like, "Hey, what is your core value?"
Right.
And they give you something that's like, "You're saying this, but your work is this."
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you
yeah.
got a blessing right there, man. For them to come with a
Absolutely.
full
Not
slide
here.
deck, you like, "Oh, I can get this to you by tonight. Thanks."
Right, right, right. Light work.
Right, man, because it's like I feel like a lot of corporations and companies and even nonprofits, they all struggle with visual identity. So it comes to that conversation of like, what is it that you want to push out? What is the conversation you want to have with this piece? Okay, who are you talking to? Like, I feel like a lot of times people say it, but then they don't realize it's not relating to whatever their core value is that they've posted out. You know what I mean? Like I feel like it gets mixed up and convoluted, but having a company that's like, hey, these are the do's and don'ts. This is what we're willing to accept. This is where we're at. This is our true tone. Man, you know how many people would be designers if that was the case?
Right. If it was that easy. If it was that
If it
easy.
was that easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get it.
Okay.
Get it.
So, what do you think about why do you think it's important that designers should enter like social justice nonprofit spaces, not just as contributors, but as leaders and decision makers? Why is that?
Man, I mean, these
Hmm.
issue areas are issue areas that, we need to be involved in the thinking and the ideas and the marketing and the campaigning of these things. These things are being communicated to us, right? And we need to be not only the recipients, but we also need to be behind the eyes and how these
Hmm.
things are being curated and how folks are being talked to and communicated to. And so, yeah, I believe that people of color need to be like at every level, typography, photography. We need to touch every part of the creative spectrum in terms of how things are communicated out. And
Hmm.
so I'm a huge advocate of folks joining the space because we need more. We need more
Hmm.
creatives. We need more thinkers. We need it all. And there's definitely plenty of space. I think there's a lot of design and branding growth that could happen within the sector as well. I feel like a lot of things get outsourced to private institutions and stuff like that and the like. Not knocking that, but like yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of room for more organizations to have more in-house designers on staff because I just think it's important. I think it's
Hmm.
important for how like just the longevity of a brand and an organization and that visual language to be
Hmm.
curated by the recipients of that work.
So here's the $1 million question though. When it
Hmm.
comes to keeping these people on, we all know the pay isn't always livable, I should say. you
Right.
know,
No, no, no. That's no secret. No secret.
There's no secret for many designers and artists. So, why do you think this conversation is still being overlooked for designers, even though we create the whole world people we live in.
I think
So
it's
what do you think
narrative.
about that?
I think it's narrative. I think it's narrative. I think it's on us as a community to really make that level of importance and for the organizations to hear us out, right? Like
Mhm.
I believe because I've sat on, both sides of the finance side and the design side. I feel like I can say this with my chest, is like the design is as important, I think, as folks who sit in finance. I'm just using finance as an example, right? Like, in
Mhm.
terms of like line item, in terms of an organization, right? You always got a finance person, right? You always got a researcher, like, all the other mechanisms and operating staff and everything like that. So I do believe that, we are the holder of ideas. We're at the
Mhm.
forefront of every idea. I can't tell you how many emails I get from people who have an idea and need help curating that idea, right? And so whether that involves imagery, whether that involves a logo, whether that involves a Word doc, a PowerPoint, which is very cool, like PowerPoints, can make or break a topic area or
Mhm.
a subject matter or a campaign, this, that, and the third. That's the bedrock of corporate,
Mhm.
corporate speak in
Right.
in movement. If we're at the forefront of that, we need to be, um, you know, equally paid, right? Equally
Mhm.
paid, equally represented. We need to have teams, not just the one lone lead designer working on a team, working on, everything for an organization. We deserve just as much support as any other operating staff, at a
Mhm.
foundation, not a foundation, but like organization.
So what do you think needs to be changed, like either structurally or even systematically for creatives to truly be valued in these spaces? I know that's a loaded question.
I know, I don't Oh man, I mean, it really has to do with the folks at the top and
Mhm.
communicating out that importance and level of importance. And so, it's getting that messaging out to them,
Mhm.
and really helping to kind of push that notion and idea along. I have on the foundation side, I feel like I've seen it, and I've seen growth. So I will say that I think more and more organizations are taking on more of a designed approach. I think folks are starting to see the importance of having an in-house design team and building that out. May not know how to start it, but I think they see the importance of having an in-house design team. And so, it starts with like
Mhm.
you and I talking, having conversation, right, and imploring other organizations to really do that.
Mhm.
Any stage I'm on, this is what I'm saying. If I'm representing nonprofit organizations, again, I've been on the accounting side, I've been on the design side. I'm telling you that like it is equally as important. We got to
Mhm.
build it out. Has to happen. Um, and I don't want to hit everybody with nowhere else, but it just has to happen. It's really important to just building a culture of design, brand, and understanding and communicating. Like everything kind of all like works together.
Okay. So let's take a shift and talk about designing in nonprofit spaces. So you've done high level design creative work for Ford Foundation, demos, a couple of other spaces. What is it that you wish people understood more about the depth and rigor and creative potential for nonprofit design?
That there is depth. There's a lot of
Mhm.
depth. There's a lot of stuff like a lot of what other organizations do, we do. I work on experiential design. I work on, like gallery shows. Any type of material that exists out in the world, I think I probably touched it in one shape or another, in terms of
Mhm.
as a designer. And so yeah, just as exciting as, as life on the private side, tech side, whatever side you want to pick, and very nuanced. I think the way I look at it, I akin myself to like artists that work in the editorial space, right? And I do a lot of content creation in terms of visuals for for stories and everything. And
Mhm.
so there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of email marketing. Sometimes that's just a job, like where folks just
Mhm.
only focus on email marketing, social media marketing, and so. Um, and those campaigns, depending on how we create, who we're in the room with, have the power and potential to shift policy, to shift public perception, and that goes back years. And so like there's a rich history in how design in the nonprofit space, organizing space can help shift the needle
Mm.
in terms of again public perception,
Mhm.
campaigning, policy. And so yeah, I think more folks should definitely be on this side of thing and take its nuance seriously because it's
Mhm.
fun. I think it's fun. It's interesting. It's intriguing, and yeah, has a lot of room to grow in
Mm.
terms of yeah, future.
So how has working in this like arena sharpen your understanding of responsible design?
just honing in on the stories, honing in on the stories, honing in on policy. It's made me working for a global organization just like have more of like a world view, a global view of certain topic issues. And which also I think is just important. We're moving in a more global society
Mhm.
anyway, and so yeah, how do we start to look at things not through my singular lens as somebody that lives here in the United States, but from a global lens?
Mhm.
And why is that important? And tapping into the why, and also like I said, like and being more communal and working with
Mhm.
folks from different backgrounds, different regions, and hearing their stories and making sure that their work is best represented in the voice that they want to have out into the
Mhm.
world. And so yeah, it's definitely made me yeah, just super sharp. Language, how do we do we include different languages, all sorts of things. It's definitely helped make me a lot more rounder in terms
Okay.
of designing.
So, what jewel or gem would you give a designer who's contemplating either going into nonprofit mission versus agency and commercial work? What would you tell them that is like very underestimated about this path?
How enriching it is. I think, I hear a lot of, I'm in a lot of conversations with folks, and this isn't to, not bad mouthing anybody who works, in the private sector, but I get a lot of private sector conversations about their work on the day to day and,
Mhm.
folks working to kind of keep the lights on or, compromising, on certain values just to kind of have status quo sort of thing.
Mhm.
And so I think the enrichment part is a huge part. I think like I said, like I think being where where I sit, just having a global view. I think even the things I'm able to do outside of the organization and the people that I've worked with in terms of
Mhm.
documentary, editorial, just different issues and topic areas. Like there's just so much variety in the types of work that you can jump in on and support, especially in times like right now, you know what I mean? And again, I'm jumped into this more in a response to I was gonna do this stuff anyway, but I think 2016 really spearheaded my
Mhm.
acceleration in wanting to give myself up to the social impact space. But yeah, I think about, my parents, living in the 70s and like them not really having the time or space to really participate
Mhm.
on in the civic engagement level that they would would have loved. And so yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to be able to flex your muscle,
Mhm.
share your support uh, for organization and causes that are really meaningful to today because they're so important and vital to the lifeblood of not only America but also globally as well.
That was beautiful. I might even think about it. That was just well that man, just because we as a designer, we find these projects, right? And I've been part of that where it's just like it's a great idea, but then the whole thing that comes down to it is monetary. And that's the hard part for a lot of people. But I think the way you explained it, sharing how you speak with other people that aren't creatives and how they feel about their work, it's like you guys have to like see the big picture. It's not as much as our society and the push for like bigger, badder, who's flossing, who's showing off more, who's got the best thing. It's kind of like it's like a soul value or moral value that
Hmm.
you gain because it's just like you don't know who's in that space that can know somebody whose uncle is somebody, whose mom is the secretary somewhere that could easily just be like, hey, this person did this wonderful project here. I think we could bring them on. I feel like they did that path of like the quick, fast gratification of like, oh, yeah, I work for, so and so design house or so and so design firm. And it's just like, okay, but it's not like I don't know. I think for me, it's just the financial aspect that a lot of people get stuck on rather than the value that they're bringing to a team.
Right. And I mean, there's a way to spread that out, right? Like,
Hmm.
like I may have to work a little harder to kind of make ends meet, but
Right.
I'm also hearing the same thing from other people. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, and so the same folks that, I would speak to on the private side are saying to me, like, yeah, I have to do my job and a couple other jobs to kind of make ends meet. Right. And
Hmm.
so it's a different, like the numbers are different, but kind of all doing a little bit of the same thing. And so,
Hmm.
if you can create a base somewhere,
Yeah.
then why not?
Right. So let's talk a little bit about these goals of like teaching and legacy and mentorship. You said you want to become a professor and eventually a design elder. What does a design elder mean to you beyond just the title or experience?
It's a legacy. It is sitting in somebody's mind's eye, right? In terms of like livelihood, longevity, all the things. I think that's important. I think that's important to be able to sit at every different point of like a life cycle in
Mhm,
terms of being and a design elder. Especially in the space that I'm in. I think it's important. Just for again, just for like just having somebody in your mind's eye that you are striving toward or um uh in a yeah, I guess like yeah, just a life goal in terms
mhm,
of a north star and everything. Being a pillar and what that responsibility means, right? And sharing your visual identity with others as they kind of go along their design path and everything. I think it's really vital. I think I see it in different avenues, different
mhm,
spaces. Going to art school, it exists in a lot of different in a lot of other communities, and so I think it should also exist in ours as well,
mhm.
and that history should be well documented and cemented and celebrated.
So, as we stay here for a minute, I'm just curious, what did you discover on your own that you want to make easier for the next generation of Black and brown designers?
Um, just that notion of leaning in, trusting who you are, who
Mhm,
you think you are, the work that you want to put out, whether that, do the corporate thing. You could do both, right? And so
mhm,
learn the skills that it takes to navigate as a designer, right? So building the PowerPoint decks and building the posters and the websites and all that good stuff. But like,
mhm,
just really experimenting and tapping in to your essence and your purpose and keeping that top of mind and holding that close and forging that path forward because we a lot of times we're doing this we talked about it at the top of this conversation is that like we're forging a path with a lot of times with no people in front of us to
mhm,
really help guide us in terms of left or right and sort of
mhm,
thing. And so yeah, I would say that like if you feel like you're a creative, if you feel like your voice is best heard on a creative stage, then do that work and
mhm.
it continue to fan those flames in terms of again in terms of purpose and drive and just identity.
So, just curious about this. Through your experience with big brand names and, working towards mission-driven work, what did you have to unlearn in order to define success on your own terms?
That is a good question, man. Just letting go of I guess like social media expectations.
Mhm,
Man, when Instagram first kind of, at least for me, when I don't know, I want to say around 2011, 2012, I think Instagram was starting to kind of kick off and
mhm,
I was seeing a lot of art. I was seeing a lot of artists and like I really wanted to do what they were doing and it used to eat me up inside that I didn't have the requisite skills to try to like I felt like to create an
mhm,
image or a style or a thing and and so I think at some point I had to let a lot of that go, right? And I had
mhm,
to just kind of like take a step back and be like, well this like accept my path for what it was. Working at, organizations that maybe not have the biggest like digital footprint and letting go of like what that means. And so knowing that like I'm going to use a Philly term, but like trusting the process, right? And really embodying what that means and
mhm,
kind of just letting my skills take me where they needed to go, sort of
mhm,
thing. And so essentially letting not certain things, well, yeah, letting certain aspects of like that fame or like whatever that is, that visibility kind of die a little bit for the sake of like honing my own craft, right?
mhm,
And so still have, like big dreams of like, fame, fortune and all those things and
mhm,
whatnot. I'm currently forging a path on a more fine artist tip right now. So I'm really
mhm,
excited about where that's gonna take me. But yeah, just believing in timing, right? And
mhm,
then and yeah, just really trusting yourself that you'll kind of get yourself from point A to point B, talking to mentors, talking to, folks in your community, tapping into resources, just knowing that it like not everything has to happen all at once.
mhm,
And that it can be stretched out over a timeline. So when you feel comfortable that like things will kind of start to open up
mhm.
for you and not to be too hard on yourself in the early beginnings and stages.
Yes. So, was there a singular moment or was it like multiple moments where you decided, you know what, I want to work with stuff that aligns with like my values, my core values? Was there a singular moment? Was it a conversation? Was it just a spark of an idea? What was that moment that helped you realize, okay, I want to work along more with my values?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, like 2016, that result really in the space that I was working in at the time, and I think just some of the just conversation that was kind of like bubbling around, and yeah, it felt like a turning point for the country. And so
Hmm.
I really took it to heart, internalized it, and decided that I was going to, yeah, like that was going to be my focus. I
Hmm.
had a very short window on like how that was going to manifest itself, but yeah, I think I reached for it, and I'm glad
Hmm.
I did the things to help me get there. But that would be kind of like, yeah, an inflection point for me would be that moment in terms of turning points. Yeah.
So I know you mentioned a little bit about the season you're in, your season you're changing into becoming a fine artist. How have you dealt with this, like this journey of soul searching, undoing imposter syndrome, and peeling back these layers? So with this, doing all that, what season are you in right now as a creative?
Right, man. Great question. Great. Excited to share it. So 2025 for me was like a year of like reclaiming, just
Mhm,
reclaiming a ton of things for myself personally.
mhm.
Graduating from graduate school, I took really personally as well. I've
Well,
had,
congrats about that. That's no easy feat.
yes,
Congrats.
working and going to school. Yeah,
Going to school, man, I did it. So whenever someone says that, I gotta say, hey, congrats, I did it.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, man. I mean, yeah, that last semester, like in tears, right? Like like just thinking like pushing through imposter syndrome because I've gotten really close to finishing a master's at one point in my life. And my parents never let me forget that. But only myself too, you know what I mean? So
Mhm,
like, yeah, so like having that as like a chip on my shoulder moving into 2025 and being able to sunset that on my own terms felt really great. Another thing, not design related, but design related. I never got a chance to go to study abroad, and so I wanted to spend some time down in Mexico City. The impetus of that trip was Design Week. And
mhm,
so I was able to spend a lengthy amount of time down in Mexico City and everything and meaningful. So like
mhm,
reclaiming things that I think just get growing up and
mhm,
just working and growing and everything just didn't have the time and space to do. So as I say all that, moving into 2026, being an artist, being known for my artwork outside of an organization, I think I've dedicated a lot of time to social impact work. We'll still continue to do that work,
mhm,
but I want to make a name for myself and my brand and in the artwork and everything like that. That's independent of assignments and commissions and everything. And so really excited to kind of dig into that work right now. So
mhm,
I'm currently seeking out fellowships and grants and all the things right now in this moment. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, and then continuing my book series, Amadou. So I
mm.
created a book, illustrated a book a couple years ago, Amadou Goes to School. Working on making that a series. And so yeah, definitely jumping in on that this year, and I'll have like probably like 2 releases by the end of the year and stuff like that. So I'm really excited about jumping back in there. But yeah, man. It is a year for I always say like just moving forward, right?
Mhm,
And so just constantly whatever that means, checking off these lists and manifesting and just the things that I want to see out in the world and who I am and sharing my
right,
story as an individual
mhm.
to, my audience and my community and stuff. So really excited about jumping in. So all about moving forward.
That's dope. That's dope. So I don't wanna brush over the book, though. So let's talk about Amadou Goes to School.
Indeed.
What did illustrating your first children book unlock in your creativity? Like, emotionally, physically, skill set? What did it unlock for you?
It unlocks a lot, so much.
Mhm,
You mentioned imposter syndrome. I had that's been in the making for a while, and it
mhm,
sat on my heart for a very long time. I knew very important. I did that in partnership with my buddy Mo. He was the writer on the book. Yeah, I mentioned wanting to do digital portraits, and so
mhm,
like I felt like I never really got to see that through as an artist, as an individual artist, and so creating a book of that scale with pages, something that's like continuous and has
mhm,
continuity and emotion and all sorts of different things was definitely a challenge for sure.
mhm,
And it took a lot to kind of like overcome. in terms of yeah, just wanting to kind of get that out into the world. It was really, really important. The story's really, really important in terms of just representation. My buddy's Senegalese, and so he really wanted that story to be out into the world. And a
Mhm.
lot of that had to do with his upbringing, but it was a
Mhm.
shared upbringing in terms of like first days of going to school and in a new environment, coming from in a new country and everything like that.
Mhm.
And so it felt really important to tell that story and also make it inclusive,
Mhm.
of the spaces that we kind of like grew up in and everything.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's something really beautiful about moving from social justice to children's storybook telling. Do you feel like these practices feed each other, or do you think they kind of stand alone in their own, section or column, I should say, or aisle, better yet?
Yeah. No, I think they definitely speak to one another for
Mm.
sure. I think they're very interpersonal stories that we're doing on both ends. We're both on the social impact front, but also, in the storytelling front. And I took the essence of those to kind of be almost like one and the same.
Mhm.
And so different practices obviously, but what they represent, I think, come from a homegrown place and influence community in one way or the other. I've gotten folks, and we put this book in different languages, and so like having friends, out in like Portugal come back and be like, yo, like we love this book, and having people out, um, Haiti, Paris,
Mhm.
like, like, yo, like thank you for making, like, yeah, putting this in different languages and everything like that. And so
Yeah.
having it have more of a global feel was super, super important. And the love that we've received from the book has been really great. So yeah, it's a bit of both and.
Okay. Dope. What do you hope the impact is for these stories to have on children, families, and even in the classroom?
Right. Well, just more inclusion, I think, overall, right? And
Mhm.
and seeing how, creating a base where like I hate to put it like this, it feels very ABC, but like we're all one, at the end of the
Mhm.
day, right? And so having that live, alongside like, other children's books and stuff like that kind of grew up
Mhm.
on, the Dr. Seuss's and I think the Ugly Caterpillar or whatever,
Yeah.
like those types of books and everything like that is really super, super important to just like the base and yeah, just visual understanding of other folks. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I think it contributes to the greater learning spectrum that we have today.
Okay. So let's talk about the future a little bit. Let's step into this realm as we're coming to the end of this wonderful conversation. I know you have a ton of dreams. I feel like you're a man of many ideas and thoughts and sketchbooks with everything written down that you want to come to fruition for you. So, which dream do you feel the most urgent to do right now, and why?
Really, the fine art piece to me is the just for me and my self journey as like a designer, artist, creative. Yeah, I think I've put myself visually, my identity and the things kind of like on the back burner. I think I've embodied, shouting out my parents, who've been working in the medical field and contributed years in those spaces. Same thing for me, like always kind of being on, yeah, the social impact end or the care end of the
Mhm.
work. And so, I work, I do this work for other people and other people's behalf and so
Mhm.
on and so forth. And not that I'm like, yeah, like not that I'm on a cross or anything, but like I love doing what I do, right? And so I want to see this piece through. I think
Mhm.
again, I mentioned 2025 as being a year of reclaiming. I think this fine art piece is just really important in terms of like who I am, in my essence and like how I want to move forward and everything and express my creativity and my voice and also share that with other, share that with my community. I think there's a lot of lessons and things that I've come to procure over the years, and so I want to be able to share that and represent that out, on a larger scale and stuff. So I'm really excited for that, to be honest.
Mm.
So it's like a both and also teaching. So starting to teach intro to graphic design in the fall, for the audience at Baruch. So if you're interested, you're in the New York area, definitely sign up. I'm super excited for that. So being able to kind of give back to my alma mater in that way, super, super important. And so, yeah, those 2 things are
Dope.
really important. Yeah.
Okay, let's have a quick fire round.
Okay.
These are just whatever comes to mind, or even one word, whatever helps you get the answer out the fastest, okay?
Okay.
All right. One word that describes your creative style.
Complex.
A dream publication you want to see your work in.
The Atlantic.
That's fire. Yeah, like that's fire. I think every designer wants to have that. That is a beautiful, yeah. Okay. This is about you. Okay. So, a city that inspires you visually.
I'll say Mexico City.
Mm. Analog or digital?
Oh man, analog for sure.
Okay. A song that feels like your current season of life.
Man, what is the name of that song? You know what? 143 by Music Soul Child.
One artist or designer that more people should know about.
Deborah Roberts.
Okay, cool. So, when everything is said and done, what do you hope your design work has given back to Black culture, to the community, and to design itself?
Oh, man, just a visual language, just a history of
Mhm,
visual language that folks can inspire the next generation to partake from. And yeah, I hope, I'm going to source everything. So I want people to
mhm.
know the histories that are being talked about of the pioneers that I like to, bolster up and put up into my work and everything. So I hope these people live in the archives and the history books for a very long time.
So, we're going to come to our reflection part of the podcast, where I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions, okay? And just give it a little bit of thought. But if a young Black designer heard your story and thought, I want to do meaningful work too, but I'm scared. I don't know if I can sustain a life doing these things. What would you honestly tell?
Make your ends meet. Make your ends meet at the end of the day. Don't be afraid of that. But find a way. Find a way to
Mhm,
kind of give back. It may not be in a full-time realm. That's not for everybody. Those
mhm,
opportunities are few and far between. And so if it doesn't fit your financial goals or like your bigger dreams and everything like that, maybe you sunset that. But there are other ways to contribute to the social impact space and everything like that. So find a way to balance the two or find
mhm,
opportunities that they can, because everybody, you'll be surprised. There are a lot more opportunities kind of under the hood. You email the right person, they'll hook you up and
mhm.
they'll get you involved.
So your work often makes, you take on heavy issues with many of the pieces in your work. So how do you keep your humanity intact? While constantly designing around pain, injustice, urgency. Like how do you keep your mental health healthy?
See a therapist. Not for this work, but just in general, I
Mhm,
think it's just a good practice. When you can, what makes sense to you. And I dabble in joy. I dabble in a lot of joy.
mhm,
You can ask a lot of my colleagues. I'm going to art shows. I'm taking care of self and showing up for my friends and family. So finding ways to kind of, fill all the buckets where I can. Don't try to stretch myself too thin. I've learned that the hard way. I've definitely dealt with that, and so trying to do a lot better in terms of time management and all the things. But you got to have joy. You got to tap into
mhm,
self, play video games, read, play guitar, just things that kind of take your
mhm.
mind off of everything, do a little bit of painting, some scrapbooking, whatever it is. But find your joy. I think I would, I'd throw that out.
So what do you want people to say your practice stood for when it's all said and done? What do you want people to say your practice stood for?
Empowerment, man. Empowerment at the end of the day. I think there are still a lot of histories that kind of keep us down mentally. And
Mhm,
so that's my job. My job is to empower, to educate. And so yeah, I want to keep fueling that as a momentum for everybody to kind of move forward. I have the mentality everybody eats, you know what I mean?
mhm,
Each one teach one, that sort of thing. And this is a communal thing, and that we could all, be the best versions of ourselves
mm.
outside
Yes.
of class and education and everything like that. So it doesn't have to look one way, that it can
Mm,
look very different, but as long as you get there, you get there.
yes. David, sir, this has just been a wonderful conversation. Where can the people find you and what projects do you have?
Oh man, we got some pieces coming out for Ford in a couple of weeks that I'm really excited about. Can't share with you just yet on those, but we got some pieces coming out. Like I said, I am fellowships. I am gonna develop an art show and an art showcase pretty soon. So I'm excited for that. You can find me on depicting dpicting.com. That's where you'll see my work. You can follow me on IG. Same, yeah, depicting. So DPICTING on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. Yeah, feel free to reach out. I'm here. I'm available to chat. Always down for a coffee. So yeah, I'm around.
Well, you guys, thank you so much for listening to our podcast. My name is Justin Robinson. I have the man of many tools and skill sets, David, and this is the Art School Graduate. We'll catch you guys later. Peace.
Thank you.